What's up, people? This is what you need. You can subscribe, share, donate, and also you can comment on my channel. This is a live stream. We're going to go at it one time. Billy Joe Saunders versus um, Marcelo Esteban Coceres from Argentina. Huh. Before I go into that, you can donate to my channel via Western Union or MoneyGram. Feel free to do so. I take all donations. You can talk to me about details. Marcelo Esteban Rios. I'm at Marcelo Esteban Coceres and Billy Joe Saunders. What do I think of that fight? Coceres has some really good skills. Like the Dominican guy that was facing Devin Haney. Good counterpunching. And every time Billy Joe Saunders threw his lead left, he would come straight down the pike with his counter right very quickly. Didn't put a lot of steam on it, but it was very sharp, very quick. Gave Billy Joe Saunders all kinds of problems. When I look at this fight, Billy Joe had good defense, don't get me wrong. So did Coceres. Coceres had good movement, changing levels, slipping punches, swiveling, all that stuff. Billy Joe still having the better footwork, but at the end of the day, and being the bigger, stronger guy, Billy Joe got the knockout. Now, he was working the body. At first, in the opening rounds, it looked like it was going to be a typical Billy Joe Saunders fight. But then Coceres warmed up, and by round 2, 3, the fight got very competitive, and Coceres was winning rounds. In fact, on Chris Mannix's scorecard, after round 10, the fight was dead even. And I also had it slightly to Billy Joe. Some of the rounds was kind of hard for me to score. But I thought that Billy Joe made an adjustment in the fight where he started to just keep his range a little bit further outside. So he stayed a little bit further back so that Coceres would fall short with some of his shots when he threw his punches. But still, Coceres made an adjustment, and he would crowd him, get to the inside, either clinch up or work Billy Joe on the inside. He had nice little uppercuts on the inside. Defense of both guys was on point. Coceres really looked good, and Coceres was coming up in weight from middleweight to super middleweight to face Billy Joe Saunders, who was the bigger guy. Billy Joe Saunders, they said, was flat in this fight. I didn't see that. I saw that Coceres was equally as quick as Billy Joe Saunders was. So Billy Joe Saunders didn't look as sharp. Billy Joe Saunders in the 11th round imposed his weight and size. In fact, he was starting to impose his weight and size from since the 10th round, 9th round. His trainer was telling him, Dominic was telling him that he needed to win those later rounds. Because Coceres was taking the advantage back, Billy Joe started to try and keep range to sort of keep Coceres falling short. The interesting thing, though, about the whole fight was it was very competitive. I had Billy Joe slightly ahead by 2 rounds, so it was coming into the 10th, 96-94 for me. But you could easily have had it the other way for Coceres. You could have easily had it 95-95. So I think Chris Mannix's scorecard is actually more accurate than mine. I thought Billy Joe was doing the better work to the body, especially. He landed in round 10 a really nice, solid left hook to the body. Coceres clinched up on that. And he was doing pretty good body work, even though he was getting tagged by Coceres. Coceres was the busier fighter throughout the fight, though he wasn't landing as much as Billy Joe because most of the punches were getting blocked. But the thing was, this fight was close going into the 11th round. And Billy Joe started taking control of the 11th. And then he caught Coceres, I believe it was, with a left hook. And I think that threw his equilibrium off. And then he was able to really bash him against the ropes. In a way, he was using his forearm to push back at Coceres. It was a pretty dirty thing. And he was catching him with overhand lefts. And that pretty much precipitated it into finally Coceres trying to trade with him. And he ended up getting hit with an uppercut that knocked him down. A left uppercut, I do believe. But it was a close fight. But Billy Joe was just obviously the guy who was landing the sharper, harder punches. But the thing about Coceres, he wasn't trying to put a lot of leverage into his shots. He was basically, unless he was going to the body, he was really putting leverage. But other than that, he was just trying to touch Billy Joe with shots. And so the speed and the quickness and the sharpness of which he would come back with his counters was always faster than Billy Joe could anticipate. I thought that in this fight, I thought Billy Joe didn't look wild or anything. They were saying he was flat and sluggish. I didn't see that. I saw he was just in a tough fight, and he had to make adjustments, and he was trying to make the adjustments necessary. And in the end, he realized to beat this guy, he just had to overpower him. So he used his size and strength to overpower Coceres and get him out of there. I thought that, I'm going to say this. Before this fight, I touted Billy Joe as a guy who could give Canelo problems. But after seeing him get caught with so many lead right hands, get hit to the body with combinations, and with even though he kept his defense pretty tight, nice little combinations and stuff to the head and the body, I just don't believe he can beat Canelo after seeing this. I think this fight was a good fight for him. I think he needs a couple more fights before he tries to face a Canelo, because Canelo would make easy work of him, you know. And it's interesting that all these guys I was recommended that Canelo would face, and it'd be top competition for Canelo, guys with not styles like Canelo, but guys who throw combinations, guys who counterpunch. We saw a counterpuncher in the Dominican guy against Devin Haney, and then we saw this counterpuncher in this very tough Argentinian fighters, and Argentinian fighters are known for being tough. Dominican Republic fighters are known for being tough. You know, the guy that faced Manny Pacquiao was a tough dude. You know, they know how to get around in that ring, and they know how to not get stopped. You know, so 2 tough fights. One tough for Devin Haney that will help him improve his game. I listened to Eddie Hearn talk about, you know, he wasn't trying to get soft touches for these both fighters to make them look good. He wanted them to develop and grow as fighters. So Billy Joe Saunders, he got a tough mandatory he faced, and Devin Haney had a tough mandatory he faced. The WBC had ordered that. 2 undefeated fighters, and you know when undefeated fighters come to the ring, they have a different mentality to when they get defeated. So, you know, it was good challenges for Devin Haney, good step up for Devin Haney, good step up for Billy Joe Saunders. But in my opinion, both guys are not ready for the star guys, the Canelos or the Lomachenkos. However, if they're pushing for the fight and they want the fight to happen, they can still have the fights, and we can see how good they perform against those guys. But as of these present fights I saw with Billy Joe Saunders' debut into the United States, he did get the knockout, though, which is good for him. You know, and Devin Haney didn't get the knockout. He was a little bit more inexperienced. He was kind of teeing off a lot. That's why he hurt his arm. But by and large, both fighters have a lot of potential still. Billy Joe Saunders, hell of a boxer. Pretty good tight defense. Devin Haney, same thing. Pretty good tight defense. Just a little bit wild with his offense, I thought. But, you know, both guys, you know, Devin Haney's only 20 years old. All right. Billy Joe Saunders has been 2-time world champion. You know, just fought a guy who had some of the kryptonite to what he normally does, and gives insight into, you know, Canelo would have insight into that. So if Canelo would have faced Billy Joe Saunders, for example, I would think that Canelo would beat Billy Joe Saunders, just based off the fact that Billy Joe Saunders keeps on getting tagged with that counter right, you know, and Canelo's very sharp as himself, you know, so I could see Canelo really exploiting that hole in Billy Joe Saunders' defense. Billy Joe Saunders is going to have to work on that. He'll have to adjust his range to make it possible, you know. And if Canelo was a bit mobile, like the Argentinian boxer, or you know, he you know, pivots and gets the right angles as the Argentinian boxer was doing, it could be a long night for Billy Joe, you know. But Billy Joe's still saying he would like to have the Canelo shot. You know, when I looked also at Solanke versus Demetrius Andrade, to be honest with you guys, while everybody was saying Andrade had a masterful performance, Solanke's defense was really good, and he was also countering Andrade with counter rights. Not as frequently as the Argentinian boxer in this fight, who was much more active, but he was countering him with nice straight rights as well. And so that's why, you know, when I looked at Demetrius Andrade versus this guy, everybody's touting him. I knew Canelo could beat him because Canelo is very good at throwing the lead right. So off the right angle too, he dropped Austin Trout with a lead right. So, it's those kind of things I look at and I pay attention to. And this is why I think that both Demetrius Andrade and also Billy Joe Saunders, I think they get beaten by Canelo. They got beaten by Canelo. Billy Joe Saunders got hit way too much in this fight by the Argentinian fighter with his lead rights and his uppercuts and his inside fighting and his combinations, and his rights to the body, his left hooks to the body. Even though Billy Joe Saunders had a very nice tight defense for the most part, he was still getting tagged up, and that's what kept the Argentinian boxer in the fight. Um, but it was a good fight for Billy Joe. I think it was a good test for Billy Joe, especially where this guy, he didn't know him. It was a good test for Devin Haney, whereas you remember this opponent that Devin Haney had, he only had 1 week's notice of this opponent, and the opponent appeared onto him. He didn't know he was going to face this guy. He knew about him a week before. It doesn't really matter because these guys, they prepare for whatever. It's up to it's up to their trainer or coach to really do the studies on these fighters, and have a game plan. But at the end of the day, both fighters, I don't think they're ready for. I don't think that Devin Haney's ready for Lomachenko, to be honest with you guys. And I explained the reasons: the footwork, one of the reasons; the composure, another reason. Um, I don't also think that Billy Joe Saunders is ready for Canelo, mainly because of the counterpunching that he was vulnerable to. Quick, sharp counterpunching, well timed, all for the right angles. Billy Joe did not know how to respond to that. He made an adjustment in terms of distance control, but even then, uh, Coceres, he made an adjustment to slide in onto the inside, and then he would work on the inside. So it's just very interesting how Billy Joe had to actually just overpower the dude because the other dude, he was equal to the task and he was equally as smart, and he won't be able to do that with Canelo. So that's why I think my reasons, again, purely from a boxing perspective, that Billy Joe would be relatively easy work for Canelo, because Canelo would be doing those things that we just talked about. But Billy Joe does have good defense, so I could see this fight going the distance as well. Um, maybe a closer competitive fight. Maybe Canelo gets a majority decision, or he maybe get a unanimous decision, but by close margins, maybe 7-5, something like that. Um, when it comes to these fighters, like I said, I'm beginning to realize why the franchise belt was there. Um, but I still want to see Billy Joe versus Canelo. Don't get me wrong. I don't have a problem with it. I still would like to see Devin Haney versus Lomachenko. I mean, he had the position where he was a mandatory, so he was in the position to have the Lomachenko fight. So yeah, of course, Lomachenko versus Devin Haney. I would love to see that. Um, but I really think that it favors Lomachenko. I think Devin Haney has a lot more development to do. I think him saying no Machenko and all of this stuff was just because he's a hungry young fighter. But at the end of the day, Lomachenko is he's got way more experience than Devin Haney in the amateurs and even in the pros. So I don't think Devin Haney, if he fights the fight that he fought against the Dominican Republic dude, I don't think he wins at all against Lomachenko. I mean, if he fights a different kind of fight, a smarter fight, and uses his footwork and so on, I could see him having a good chance to beat him. And he has to keep his composure, and he didn't do that. So I really don't see him beating Lomachenko based on the way how he dealt with this fight. And the same thing with Billy Joe Saunders, based on the fight I saw with him versus Coceres. I don't think he beats Canelo at this point in time. So I think, though, that the fight that Canelo should have at 168 would be the Callum Smith fight. I think that's the better fight for Canelo at this point in time. But if he wants the Billy Joe Saunders fight, that's another fight he can have. But the point is, those two fights solidify his four-weight divisional championship if he were to win them. There's all these ifs, but I mean, if he were to beat Billy Joe Saunders, that's a lot more credit to his record. But I just think that based on what Billy Joe Saunders did in that fight, that with Coceres, I think it definitely opens the door to a Canelo fight. And I mean, Canelo would easily take that fight and get the WBO belt, and then I think much more easily than maybe even the Callum Smith fight, which is kind of strange, but it's just that he has the formula to beat. I think Billy Joe Saunders. I think that with Callum Smith, Callum Smith is a young, strong guy. Canelo also has the formula to beat him in that he just has to get past his jab, get to the inside, be patient, break him down, and then, either beat him or stop him or whatever. But at the end of the day, I think no, Callum Smith was probably the easier fight for Canelo than Billy Joe Saunders. But at the end of the day, I do think that Saunders still gets tagged away a little too much with the right hand, especially against a guy who doesn't have the experience, the championship experience that he has. The guy had skills, no doubt about it, but he didn't have the championship experience. He wasn't supposed to be on the same level as Billy Joe Saunders, but he proved that skills pay the bills. We saw Anthony Joshua, be on the same level as Kovalev, and he didn't have that experience either. So I guess we see Floyd Mayweather, Genaro Hernandez. We've seen many. Jeff Horn with Manny Pacquiao. So I guess styles make fights, and also skills pay the bills. So there is a lot to this thing that we have to think about. But at the end of the day, generally the more experienced fighter who is at the top of his game would win those kinds of fights. So that fight would favor Canelo, I think. And the same thing with Demetrius Andrew. I think the Demetrius Andrew fight favors Canelo. However, I do want to see those fights and see if these guys can actually beat Canelo. That would be great. A Benavidez fight with Canelo also would be a good fight. But I think all those fights, I think Canelo beats all those guys. I think if you're going to look at tough fights, I was in a boxing group. A tough fight for Canelo would be, like I said, Alexander Bidabiev, Dimitri Bivol, Maharu Jack, Gilberto Ramirez, guys in the higher weight classes, who could impose their size, or boxing. And I thought Dimitri Bivol, he's a good one because he can move as well. He can move and make it tough for Canelo. He can move and so on, and kind of have Canelo kind of he has different plays of game, and his footwork's pretty good. So that would be an interesting fight for Canelo as well. But I don't think that anybody at 160 and 160 really gives him problems. Demetrius Andrew is probably the toughest one that he would face. Jamal Charlo, again, this dude with a jab. He has a nice, strong, sturdy jab, but then again, Gennady Golovkin had a sturdy jab. What does that mean? When you look at 168, we're talking about maybe Caleb Plant. He doesn't have that much experience, but he has some skills. Billy Joe Saunders, but again, I think Canelo catches him with lead rights. Caleb Plant, got good boxing skill, all around skill. Thinks he's got confidence and stuff. I just think the experience is the major key that makes the difference. And I think that's why Canelo would beat him. I think because of experience and the trickiness and just the little craftiness and just the little veteran moves, that Canelo would put on Caleb Plant, I think would give him the advantage. Because Caleb Plant hasn't fought at light heavyweight. None of those 168 pounders have fought at light heavyweight. Canelo has jumped past all of them and fought at light heavyweight. So, what Canelo is showing you is, I can handle you big guys. I can handle you dudes, and I know how to get past your jab, and I'm going to get on the inside of you, and I'm going to do my work. I'm gonna put that work in on you. So, Canelo kind of made a statement there, and now everybody now in 168, 170, 175 to 168, to 160, they're all paying attention to what he does next, But I do believe that the next fight that Canelo faces is either Billy Joe Saunders or Callum Smith, or it's going to be a Demetrius Andrade. It's one of those guys. Okay, or maybe a Demetrius Andrade 168. Yeah, Canelo might pull him up to 168 to face him, so he can keep his WBO belt at 160. So we'll see. I don't know exactly who Canelo would call next, but from what I see, this is what I got to say about Canelo. But when it comes to Billy Joe Saunders and when it comes to Lomachenko obviously is going to face the unified, the champion of Teofimo Lopez and Richard Comey, both of which I don't think can beat Lomachenko. I think that the people who can beat Lomachenko are people who fight smart, that they know that he's going weak side, so you have to cut him off from going weak side, and you have to apply pressure on him to push him back. You can't have him circling out and getting a chance to reset and come at you at weak side. You have to be able to cut off weak side. He also knows how to close the distance so that when you're trying to cut off weak side, he's coming in on you for the angle. So you have to watch for that as well. And if you're outboxing him, that's all you got to do. If you're inboxing, you got to slide to the inside of him and work on the inside. And don't let him clinch you up. So that's what I think That's what I think about the weekend fights with Billy Joe Saunders versus Marcelo Esteban Coceres. Good fight. Was a good fight. It had an explosive outcome. Knocked him down 3 times. The dude had a heart of a champion. He got back up all 3 times. But the referee said, you know what, you had enough, which is good because sometimes guys are just too brave for their own good and they die. They die in the ring. So, um, as to upcoming fights, we're going to talk about the upcoming fight that is coming. It's Anthony Joshua versus Andy Ruiz. That's a good fucking upcoming fight as well. I have one more fight I got to break down. I got to tell you guys about with the result of Jamal Herring and Lamont Roach. I will talk more about that. But what I noticed about the zone, they're putting on competitive fights all the way through. I've seen competitive fight after competitive fight after competitive fight. I'm really enjoying it. I'm even getting KOs. One thing about Devin Haney, he did knock down the Alvarez. He did knock down Alvarez, and that's really good for him. I think he had the formula to beat Alvarez. I just think that he didn't really apply it after that. But that's all good. It's all good. It's a learning experience. So we'll look to see what Devin Haney does next. We'll look to see what Billy Joe Saunders does next, and let's see also how their Twitter accounts and their Instagram accounts, if they're blowing up more because of this event, or if it took a hit. I think that it's going to blow up more. It's only positive things can come out of this. So I'll have a follow-up on that. By the way, I have a follow-up also on Clarissa Shields versus Terrence Crawford, on what I'm doing about that. And finally, I'm going to do a video next on the WBC's ruling on clenbuterol based on Canelo's experience with clenbuterol, and also USADA's and WADA's regulation on clenbuterol, as well as USADA's regulations on clenbuterol and what WADA is doing about clenbuterol as well. All right. So I'm going to follow up on that in a minute. Shout out to Showbiz the Adult as well. Shout out to Boxing Wave. Shout out to Intangible Boxing. Shout out to EJ Boxing Live. Shout out to D Styles Boxing. Shout out to 68 Scrapbook Ode to Wisdom, as well as shout out to who was the other one? I think Elisec Back News I also responded to. Shout out to all these channels, as well as Get This Smoke, as well as Tommy Temper. I'm going to catch y'all guys later. Deuces.